Helena adjusted the focus on her camera, scanning the empty pathway that cut through the abandoned park. The city had a way of swallowing sound, leaving only the distant hum of traffic and the rustling of dead leaves. She exhaled, pressing the shutter button. Click. The overcast sky cast a dull, gray light over everything. Trees, their skeletal branches reaching upward, stood like silent sentinels along the cracked pavement. There was a stillness to the place that she found oddly compelling, melancholic, almost poetic. She checked the image on her camera screen. Empty. Just the way she wanted it. A gust of wind sent a shiver down her spine. Helena glanced over her shoulder, expecting to see someone. But there was no one. Shrugging off the unease, she adjusted her bag and continued snapping photos. She had always loved capturing loneliness in urban landscapes. There was something intimate about places people had abandoned, as if the echoes of their presence still lingered. By the time she was done, the sky had darkened into a deeper shade of gray. A storm was coming. She packed up, heading home with the quiet satisfaction of another productive day. As she walked away, she never noticed the subtle distortion at the edge of her last frame. A tiny blur. A shape. Something, someone, that hadn't been there before. Helena sat at her desk, scrolling through the photos she had taken earlier. Most were exactly as she expected. Deserted paths, skeletal trees, a bleak sky stretching over the city's forgotten corners. Then, she saw it. Her finger hovered over the touchpad. In one of the images, near the end of the sequence, a man stood at the far edge of the frame. Motionless. Distant. A frown creased her brow. She was certain no one had been there. She would have noticed, would have waited for them to pass before taking the shot. She zoomed in, but the resolution blurred the details. The figure was tall, clad in dark clothing. His face, she couldn't make it out. There was something off about his stance, too rigid, too still. A strange unease prickled at her skin. Maybe it was just a passerby. Maybe she hadn't been as alone as she thought. Still, something about it unsettled her. Helena leaned back, rubbing her temples. It had been a long day. She was probably overthinking it. Shaking off the feeling, she closed her laptop and turned off the lights. As she crawled into bed, she told herself she would forget about it by morning. But deep down, she knew she wouldn't. And she certainly didn't expect him to be there again the next time she looked. Morning light filtered through Helena's apartment window as she sat at her desk, coffee in hand, staring at the image on her laptop screen. The man was still there, exactly as she had seen him last night, distant, unmoving. She bit her lip. Maybe it was just a passerby. But if so, why did she feel so sure she had been alone? Determined to put her mind at ease, she grabbed her camera and headed back to the park. The sky was clearer today, though the air held the sharp chill of autumn. She reached the same spot where she had taken the photo and stood still, scanning the area. Nothing. Just cracked pavement, leafless trees, and the distant drone of the city. Helena lifted her camera and began taking new shots, framing them as close as possible to the original. Click, click, click. Satisfied, she scrolled through the fresh images on the camera's display. No one was there. Exhaling, she let out a quiet laugh. See, you were just being paranoid. But when she got home and transferred the images to her laptop, her stomach clenched. In the last photo, at the very edge of the frame, he was there again. Closer this time. Still facing the camera. Still indistinct, but undeniably present. Helena's breath hitched. Her fingers trembled slightly as she zoomed in. What the hell was going on? Helena stared at the screen, her pulse thudding in her ears. The man was there again. Closer. She leaned in, squinting at the details. His clothing was dark, featureless. His posture rigid. His face, still indistinct, like a smudge on the image. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. There has to be an explanation. A glitch in the camera? A reflection? Maybe someone had been there both times, and she just hadn't noticed. Needing a second opinion, she grabbed her phone and called Daniel. Helena, it's probably nothing, he said after she sent him the image. Some guy must have been there, And you just missed him. She chewed her lip. Then why does he look the same in both pictures? The same stance, the same distance, except now he's closer. There was a pause. Then Daniel let out a short laugh. Come on, you're freaking yourself out. If it bothers you that much, stop looking at it. Helena sighed. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was obsessing over something meaningless. Yeah, she muttered. I'll just drop it. But that night, she found herself opening the image again. Her eyes traced the dark figure, the impossible stillness of it. And as she stared, she swore the pixels on the screen shifted. Just for a fraction of a second. Like he had moved. Helena barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of the man lingered, burned into her mind like an afterimage from a camera flash. By morning, exhaustion gnawed at her, but she needed answers. She transferred the image to her editing software, adjusting brightness, contrast, anything that might reveal more details. As she enhanced the image, a chill spread through her body. The man's face remained indistinct, but now, she noticed something even worse. The pixels around him were wrong, blurred in a way that didn't match the rest of the image. Like he didn't belong there. Helena's breath came shallow. Maybe it's just a camera glitch. She clung to the thought, but deep down, doubt festered. Determined to test it, she printed the image. Maybe seeing it on paper would reassure her. But the moment she pulled the fresh print from the tray, her hands turned ice cold. The man was even closer than before. Helena's pulse roared in her ears. She scrambled back to her laptop, opening the original file. The man was still where he had been last night, farther away. But in the printed version, he had moved. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. She turned the photo over, hiding the image. She couldn't explain it. But one thing was certain, this wasn't a camera glitch. And whatever was happening, it was getting worse. Helena's world felt like it was slipping away. The man, the photo, she couldn't escape it. She tried to go about her day normally, but every little noise, every shift in the shadows, felt charged with the weight of him. Her apartment, once a sanctuary of solitude, had become oppressive. That night, she sat in front of her mirror, brushing her hair, but the reflection in the glass seemed to twist, distort. Something in the corner of her vision, movement, a flicker of something in the background. She spun around, heart pounding. The apartment was empty. But when she looked back at her reflection, she gasped. There, just behind her, standing in the dimness of the hallway, was the man. Her breath hitched. She rushed to the door, opening it and scanning the hallway. No one. Just silence. Her hands shook as she closed the door, locking it. She turned to the mirror again. The man was gone. Helena ran her fingers through her hair, trying to steady herself. You're losing it. You're imagining things. But when she picked up her phone to check the time, she noticed something odd. Her screen, dark and lifeless moments ago, now glowed faintly. She tapped it, the home page flickering to life, but the wallpaper was no longer just a cityscape. It was the same photo. And there, in the corner, was the man again, standing at the edge, just a little closer. Her heart pounded. He was following her, and he was getting closer. Helena's pulse raced, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She couldn't keep denying it anymore. The man wasn't just confined to the photo. He was in her life, in her space, in the very air she breathed. Her fingers trembled as she stared at her phone screen, the image of the man looming in the corner. Each time she looked away, the feeling that he was there, close, hung over her like a heavy fog. She grabbed her camera, her hands slick with sweat, and began frantically deleting all the photos, hoping that somehow erasing the images would rid her of him. But when she pressed delete, it didn't feel like enough. She destroyed the printouts she had made, crumpling them into tight balls of paper, but as she tossed them into the trash, her eyes caught a glimpse of something in the corner of the room. The reflection in the mirror. Helena froze. There, behind her, standing as still as ever, was the man. His outline was sharper, his face more distinct now, though still unnervingly blurry, as if his presence was trying to escape the limitations of the photograph. In panic, she swiped the mirror clean with her sleeve, but when she looked again, he was still there. Frantic, she pulled out the phone again, hoping to delete the cursed image once and for all. But the photo wouldn't go. Every time she tried to remove it, the phone simply reset, opening to the same image once more. She couldn't escape. And the man was getting closer, each second pulling her deeper into his reach. Helena stood frozen in her apartment, her hands numb and trembling. The man was in the mirror. He was on her phone. He was everywhere she looked, a shadow following her every step. She couldn't sleep, couldn't think, couldn't breathe without the creeping sense that he was getting closer. In a moment of desperation, she decided to face it head-on. She grabbed her camera and aimed it at her apartment, hoping to capture something that might make sense of this nightmare. Maybe if I can photograph him in full, she thought, maybe I can make him go away. The lens clicked. She stared at the image on the screen, waiting for something to change. But nothing. Helena exhaled, the tension in her shoulders momentarily lifting. Maybe it was over. Maybe he was gone. But then she turned to the mirror. Her reflection stood as it always had, except for one detail. In the glass, just behind her, the man stood, inches away, smiling. Her heart skipped a beat. His face was clearer now, though still not entirely formed. There was something dark in his eyes, something hungry. His smile stretched unnaturally wide, a grin that made her skin crawl. "No," she whispered. She took a step back, stumbling over her feet. But the reflection didn't move. Panicked, Helena turned back to the photo on her camera, hoping it would hold the answer. And when she looked at the screen, she saw him again, closer than ever. Her throat tightened, her mind screaming in terror, but the words wouldn't come. She spun around, desperate to escape, but when she glanced at the mirror again, he was already inside the room. And this time, he was not smiling. And that's it. The story is over. But is it really? What do you think happened in the end? Was there any escape, or was it already too late? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your theories. If you enjoyed this creepy tale, don't forget to leave a like, it really helps. And if you love horror stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the things we capture in a photo are far more than just images. See you in the next one. Stay safe.